Hello and welcome to Perspectives with
Lisette.
and Martina. Hello, you all, and yes, welcome back. Hope you all are having a great day or night whenever you're watching this video. I hope you are having a great day. Um, we are back. This is our fourth and final episode in our Growing Old in America series. And yeah, gonna wrap it up here. We're gonna try to stay within our time limit, but people who know us knows, we can go off a tangent, but we always bring it back, always bring it back. So we hope folks have gotten a chance to watch our first three videos. If you haven't, you should go back and watch that. And if you have watched, you go back and watch it again because it's growing old in America, so it's never going to change, especially because we live in America. But yeah, so thanks for everybody for listening and watching and subscribing and liking. It means a lot to us. So thanks, guys. And yeah, I think we can just kind of hop right into it.
Yeah.
I think per usual, but Seth and I always kind of have a little powwow. I don't think powwow is appropriate to say nowadays. So let
No,
me
it's not.
back that up and say, excuse me, even though I do have Native American blood in me, but that is not appropriately. It's not an appropriate thing to say nowadays. So I should back that up and say, Lisette and I always have our little touch base. Before we, start recording each of our episodes. Even
Mhm.
though we've met and planned, you got to keep things fresh. And so as we're thinking about this fourth episode and kind of where we started talking about, having resources, not having resources, insurance, how do we get to insurance, talked about our parents, her dad, uh, my dad, and really, a thing that we both often talk about on here is how we're both caregivers. You're, directly a caregiver, and even though my dad, I don't live with him, he's not that far from me. I am his point of contact. And with my mother being sick this year, me and my brother have been jointly caregiving for her. And
Yeah.
so, I think it's really we want to spend some time talking about just like caregivers and what that means. And let's say you brought up a good point before we started. We're not getting any younger, everybody's getting older. And so as we continue to grow older, we're gonna need more care. That's often the thing is as you get older you do need more care. Even if you are, quote unquote healthy, there's still certain things you have to get checkups more often, or you're supposed to. That's something we're talking about too. Sometimes people don't always get their checkups. But, it's a little
Yeah.
bit of what we want to spend kind of this final episode talking about. So I've spoken enough and I'll turn it over to Lisette to say some words.
Say some words. No, when we were kind of chit-chatting before we hit record, and we were talking about like how do we wrap up this series?
Mm.
Because it's a series that obviously, and it's a topic that will continue on, right? It's a topic that will continue to have more to talk about, and we'll probably weave into some other things that we talk about in the future. Because yeah, like we're both growing old. We're both gonna have to experience, the system as well as, we kind of get into our older years and things like that. But one of the things that, as you mentioned, Martina, is that caregiving role. Like if you've been watching the series, you've heard us talk about our parents and sort of the role that we've had to play, and how sometimes like we've had to be the ones to show up to appointments, to take them to the ER, to we
Mhm.
get the phone calls from the doctor's office, and how do you, navigate the healthcare system, and how do you do that? And I think both of us are fortunate enough to have siblings that are also kind of like helping in that realm too, because it's really hard, even though both of us are in, this public health realm, and you would think that would help us in one way, shape, or another. It really doesn't because our healthcare system is so confusing. You It's not geared towards the everyday person to understand how to navigate. you never really know what's covered, what isn't covered, and then it even gets worse when you get into, these public programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and the navigating those are pretty impossible sometimes because of the requirements that they have and the understanding and the windows of time that you have to like
Oh yeah.
apply for something or get like and all these things. So as caregivers, like you have to stay on top of that, right? Like you have to like try to understand, or you have to figure out to ask the right questions, and sometimes you're asking the questions and nobody can give you an answer. Like nobody really knows what the answer is because there is no standard of anything when it comes to our healthcare system. Like there isn't like, here's the standard X, Y, and Z of like, if you come in on Tuesday, by Thursday, you should have all of your benefits, everything like ready, set to go, whatever. There isn't a standard because each insurance agency, you know, has its own set of standards, has its own timelines, has its own things. So I think it just becomes really interesting just to kind of see as I kind of take on more, me and my siblings take on a little bit more of like this caregiving and having to understand it, like how much we don't know, how much we don't know how to navigate, and if you don't know how to ask the right questions, and even when you're talking to maybe a healthcare professional, so if you're talking to the doctor doesn't know either.
I know.
Like they don't know they don't
Most
know
of
what's
them
going
don't care
on. The
anymore.
nurses sometimes, yeah. And I'm like, I get it, right? Because you're a doctor, you're concerned about like getting people fixed, and that's your sole role is, again, then it's not to know all the administrative, you know, background information of what insurance and all these things are. But when you have so many different insurance companies and different policies and different like standards, and like I can't even imagine going through all of that and then having to understand it. I don't even understand my own insurance sometimes.
Okay.
Like I mean, Martina, I was just telling you about how like I'm trying to figure out what's going on with my medication
Right.
because it's been weeks, and for some reason my insurance thinks that I already got my medication, but I'm like, I haven't picked up the medication. So I'm like, I don't even understand what's going on with my prescription. I was like, how, I mean, and I speak the language. I can read it. I can write it. I'm supposed
Hmm.
to understand all of this. I go into the app. I go to my, the app that I use for my insurance to see what's going on. And I'm like, I
Yep.
still don't know. And I don't want to insurance because I don't want to spend an hour trying to understand and get the run
Yes.
around it. And all these things. But again, it goes back to as you get older, if you do not, and like, and in my case, in the case of a lot of like first and second gen individuals whose parents maybe came from a different country, don't maybe fully understand the language,
Yeah.
like as they're getting older, how are they even how can they even understand what they have to navigate, because there's that language barrier, there's that understanding of like, who are you calling, how do you sign up for these, how do you sign up for Medicare? Like I had to learn that. Like I had to be the one to figure out like how to,
Yep.
get that, and and my sister too, like, okay, we need to figure this out. Like we're the ones having to navigate that because, our parents just, there's that language barrier. And even though there are people in the system that speak the language, they aren't, their job isn't to explain it to the person. They're just there to make sure that you
It's getting
get it,
done.
right? That you
Yeah.
just, it's getting done and you're signing up, but they're not there to answer all your questions and like all these things. They're like, but it just, again, I think overall over the course of these episodes that we've been talking about, I just get the sense that it's not going to get easier, right? It's not going to, get
It's not
easier
going to.
unless something is done from a federal level. from a in sort of a policy level to make those changes.
That's that
But
too.
like,
What do you think?
but I think there's, in addition to that, at a federal level, when it comes to just, I know people don't like to hear healthcare for all, right? There's a lot of people that don't care
They
for
don't. Mm-mm.
people that have access to healthcare, and they think it's a socialism, and people don't quite understand what that all means. Like at the end of the day, if you're talking about Medicare, Medicare at the end of the day is really, it's a social service. It's
Hmm.
a socialist concept because we're paying into something, it's taxpayer dollars that, people
They
are
don't like that
getting.
either.
But I'm like, but yet you are depending on like Medicare, you're depending on Social Security. Social Security again, you know, individuals who are like, oh, can't wait to get my Social Security. I'm paying to Social.
They ain't gonna be
I'm
nothing
like, you
left for
do know that
us.
that is something that we're all paying into. But I'm like, but it's probably not gonna. Yes, probably not. But I'm like, again, like it is something that we're paying into. It's our dollars that go to support Social Security. Like it's the same thing when it comes to whether it's healthcare for all. Like I don't mind take some of my pennies to help people get the care that they need and have
Yes.
access to the medication they need. Like go ahead, like that I'm all for. Like we're all for people having public education, access to public education. Why can't we be all for getting access to care that we all would benefit from? All of us would benefit. But I think I went off on a tangent, so I'm a pause there,
Yes,
Martina.
okay. I'm grabbing my charger. 1 second. I'm back. Here we go.
Go
So
for
give
it,
me a second.
like a smart.
Um, yeah, you like again, you brought up so many good points. And I think, gosh, is what we're talking about in this country, like the things that people think of socialist programs and that they're not for it. To me, it is always baffling is that like you said, we have public education, which sometimes if you're from where I'm from, it's very shitty, but at least it's public and it's free. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't understand either why is healthcare? Because if you don't have your health, you don't have school, you don't have housing, you don't have nothing. You're not here anymore. So I just always think
Yeah.
it's so interesting for people who are not for the universal health care. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's, depending on how you look at it, some people might say it's selfish. I think it's selfish on your end. If you're not somebody who would like to pay into it. And people, of course, it does get a little bit more in depth when you look at, things like lung disease or emphysema, things that people think, oh, well, if you wasn't doing this, you wouldn't have, you
Yeah.
wouldn't have this. But there are people out here who have those illnesses, who have those diseases, who have never smoked a cigarette in their life. They've never been around anybody who smoked a cigarette. And even if they
Yeah.
have, what does that have to do with them getting care? Because there's so many other things in this country we allow to happen.
Yeah.
Um, that are impacting other people
Mhm.
in like a negative way or a positive way. But this one is just like this universal health care is always just so interesting for me from a public health perspective. Now, of course, the
Mhm.
healthcare side of things, healthcare wants the money. Obviously, that's a kind of a big difference between public health and healthcare is
Yeah.
they're not one and the same, although we do need to work together more, healthcare and public health. But healthcare,
Yeah.
you have different associations and different organizations out there. I won't give out any names, um, who are for um, insurance, but they're trying to be more for that universal care as well. Now don't get me wrong, I think definitely like if you're a provider, everybody should be getting paid for what they do. I know people in the
Yeah.
medical field, the healthcare field, many of them spend years getting training and education. Even after that, you still have to get recertified. You have to get those credits. I understand that, but it's also a part of it like kind of taking it away. To me, it's like taking away the business side of things, which we really can't. We've talked about as well. You can't really take the business side out of it. Um,
No.
Even though in an instance for me with this, when I think of insurance, it's something in this country that our government is way too involved in. Our insurance
Mhm.
companies have way too much leniency. to tell people
Yeah.
what they can and cannot do, what's covered, what's not covered. And to me, I always say the things that happen in this country is because of our federal government. Most of these are federal issues, but then we also have, as you talked
Yeah.
about, Medicaid, which is state-based. And we already know where I'm from in Mississippi, they didn't even accept the expansion, as with many other southern states. So,
Yeah.
that's one reason my mother this year was having so many issues getting post care after she had her emergency surgeries and things like that, is because
Yeah.
Mississippi didn't accept the expansion because they don't want people to have better health care.
Yeah.
You have to be able to afford it. And as we were talking about earlier, if you can't afford it, honey, they want you to be on Skid Row. Like they don't want you to have
Yeah.
anything. You can't have any sort of
Hmm.
assets or investments or anything. They just expect you to come here. Like all you make a year is $5,000. And that probably somebody out there who did. That is what they're making in a year. They may are
Yeah.
having a difficult time. And that's what they want you to make in order to be on these programs, which is, I mean, that's a whole different can. I know we may come back to that. But anyway,
You may come
I,
back. Yeah.
I wanted to talk of like about this the really insurance thing and about coverage because one thing I thought of as you were talking is that yeah, with my mother being sick, like she has Mississippi Medicaid. That's what she has. And I'm still on a journey to look for supplemental insurance because obviously Mississippi Medicaid is not cutting it. It's not cutting
Yeah.
it at all. And one thing it had me thinking about is that, and I think we've talked about this. If it wasn't at the beginning of this series, it was in a series where we talked about how insurance is connected to you having a job. Like most of the time, if you have a
Yeah.
job, you have insurance. I
Yeah.
think almost everyone does that. It's like a universal thing here. But you can have your children covered or your spouse, but you can't have anyone else go. And I was like, it wouldn't it be amazing
Yeah.
if I could just put my mother on my insurance, but I can't because she's not considered. I don't know what that's categorized in insurance language. Like, she's
Immediate
not
family
considered.
or something like that, or
Wait, say it again.
immediate family,
I was gonna say yeah because she's not.
or
I
like
guess yeah.
dependent. Like I think it's dependence. Like whoever there's a certain amount that they have to depend on you. Like your children depend on you completely
Yes,
and your spouse. But I'm like, but my parents depend on me too. So why can't I
exactly.
why can't I put them on?
Exactly. I was like, if I could put my mother as a dependent, boy, like she would be getting much better care. Well, I guess faster care because she is getting care. But honey, it's as slow as molasses. Like literally, you're talking about, I think you did bring this up, but she was signed up for some program. Like my brother and
Faster.
I signed her up for something since she's been going through this healing journey. And she had to get on a wait list. Literally, it was to actually get a caregiver there with her when my brother and I can't be
Yeah.
there. And luckily, we were able to actually get her a caregiver and get her what she needed before then. But she had to go on a wait list. She just heard back from this organization last
Oh wow.
week. She got on the wait. My brother put her on the wait list, I think, in June.
Wow.
We are in September. And she literally got a call and she had to remember what the call was because we put it back on it at June. So it's
Yeah.
like if we had to wait to get somebody to help with my mother, what situation that's like if we, luckily again, we've been able to put
Yeah.
our two heads together and um she has a pretty decent care team, although some of her physicians they do get on my nerves, but that's the difference. But all of us have been able to kind of put our heads together and get her the services that she needs. But it's also just a matter of getting the service and just when you are on these sort of federal or state programming, social programming, socialist, whatever people want to call it, it's not
Hmm.
quick fixes with that. Like again, that's just one example that I have is that my mother would have had to wait, what's that, for like 3, 4 months ago? I can't recall. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that we even signed her up to even be a part of this organization or to get assistance from this organization. And, it's said that that is like the norm for a lot of
Yeah.
different assistance. Whether
Yeah.
it's healthcare or food, whatever the situation may be, school, that's such a thing, in this country. It's like to me, I don't understand why do we have these wait lists? Now, somebody out here who maybe has a PhD in something, who has more insights into this, can maybe help me understand it. But from on the outside, trying to get it in, in the inside. To me, it's just look like, why do we have these wait lists? Even when you are on trial, you have a right to due process. You can get a quicker trial than you could get medical coverage when you need it. So it's just like, I don't know, it's just kind of, it's just interesting to me that there are already so many walls and barriers. And then
Yeah.
when you're finally able to get that assistance that you need, look how long you've had to wait.
Yeah.
And thing is, like being a caregiver is, and we were talking about this before we started. Is like, I don't even think caregiving is even covered on insurance. Again, somebody out there who may know different, let us know. But it's not something that, you can get reimbursed for or that's even covered. I mean, hell, we have so many other things that are not covered as well, but it's like that's just not something that is
Yeah.
often considered in terms of somebody's healthcare, and especially as we get older, as we're saying, like, you don't want to be ill, but you're getting older and your body's not what it was when you were 20, so you gotta have to keep up with yourself and try to maintain being healthy. But we know, even just from systemic issues, racism, all these sort of things come into play as well, where you are not able to actually sometimes get the care that you need because the system is not set up to serve the people who
Yeah.
need it. That's what I was trying to say. I'm done. That was a long time. I'm getting some water.
I know we spent a lot of time in this series talking about through the lens of healthcare. And I think because from you and I, our perspective has been a lot of dealing with the healthcare system
Hmm.
and things like that when it comes to sort of growing old. But I think there's also the side of growing old in America as it pertains to like food security, right? The access to food. I think that also gets overlooked a lot of times because a lot of you know, our work has revolved around, communities that are under resourced and we know that they don't have access to, you know, fresh fruits and vegetables. Like, a lot of our communities don't have access to that, don't have access to,
Basic
the
things.
just basic things. We're not even talking about like having access to like,
A caregiver,
you know,
just fruits and vegetables.
caregivers, just fruits and vegetables, having access to just food and being able to afford the food
Mhm.
that you need to live on, to even just like, healthy options. Like I think that's, part of it. And, a lot of the times, as I mentioned, preventive health care isn't a part of the conversation a lot of the times. We talk about healthcare from a lens of like, if I'm sick, I'm going.
Yes.
But there's also that preventive health, and preventative health really looks, for me in my lens, it's yes, it's the food that we eat and we have access to, but it's also the housing.
Yes.
Like, do we have access to access to just housing? Like, do I have a
In
place to
general.
live? And then is that place livable? Like, can I live, like, or is it not? Like, there's all these other, layers as well. And I think it's really hard for some people to be able to grow old in place, right? Like if you don't have, a care system or a support system where you're like, I can grow old where I am comfortable, where I know, the area where and like, and a lot of times people have to give up where they're living. They have to, like you just talked about, like giving up your assets and then having to do away with what you work so hard for, and then being able to, like, now I gotta just say, get rid of all my assets because I need to be at this really low threshold so that I can get, the help and the care, and hopefully have access to the housing I need, to the food that I need. But I think there's this whole different layer of conversation to growing old in America that revolves around access to food, that revolves around access to walkable streets and,
Mhm.
safe places to walk. And then, so that all like that, I'm gonna go into like public health street, like a built environment, right? Like your built environment where you live, where you work, where you play and things like that. So I think it's just there's so many layers to this conversation. I think
Yeah.
to me, just right now, is like, man, we've just kind of touched on one pillar, which is the healthcare side of growing old and the access and all of that. But then there's this whole other pillar, like fortunate enough that, I, am able to, help my parents out and, we help each other out. We have this system where, supporting each other and, we have access to housing, we have access to, the healthy options if we want them and things like that. Like we have that access. But if one wrong thing happens, you know, there's, whatever, knock on wood, nothing, happens, but like one, false move, we go through a recession again and, all these things, like one little thing, like all of that can be gone and there's no safety net for any of us. Like there is no resource. There's just temporary fixes. Like I know you and I, Martina, have talked about temporary fixes when it
Yep.
comes to food. Like food pantries are just this immediate fix, but it's not something that's long term. Like we've talked about this. If you've been
Mhm.
following us, you've talked about like how food should be a right. We should have access to food. We should have access to housing because those should be rights and not privileges. Um, and I think it becomes even more so apparent as you grow older, especially here in America. Like, we can't speak for other countries and things like that, but from what I've seen, just from the work that I do and the work that we have done, like there are a lot of people who, as they grow older, as they go through, these different, systems and, the different, access to services, a lot of the times you hear of like, I don't have, housing, or I had to move in with my kids, or I
Mhm.
had to, do this, or, I have to, go to a food pantry, every month, or I have to go to different food pantries
Yep.
because, this food pantry only has certain things, and then I have to find a food pantry. And then there's food pantries that you can only access if you live in that zip code, in that community area, so it's all these things. Like I recently found out there's one food pantry that services all of the Chicagoland area. They're like, if you come here, you're gonna leave with food, which I think is amazing and amazing that they do that because I'm like, a lot of places, especially that food pantry kind of style or sort of that the emergency food, like they're like you have to show an ID, you have to show that you live in the community, and I mean it just like if I need food, I just need food, like, and I'm here because I need it, but there's just so as you were talking and so you just kind of made me think of just so many other layers that we didn't get a chance to really touch
Mhm.
on this series in these episodes that I'm sure we'll touch on in
We'll
future
circle
episodes.
back. Yes.
We'll circle back to this. As you all know, we always come back to to series, but I think it's just important to acknowledge that we understand and know that there are other layers to growing old in America, and other systems that also need to be addressed and changed in order for all of us to have to live, long lives, to live and have, quality of life, and not just quantity, but like a quality of life, and have access to everything that we need to be able to, just just live a good, healthy
Yeah.
life. Like,
Yeah.
I think most of us want that. It's just we know that because either of economic status, the color of our skin, where we live, just determines what we'll have access to and what we won't have access to. And that sucks. I mean, I got no other way to put it.
I was gonna open with that. That sucks. Well, we're getting towards the end here, so I'm not going to go too in depth. But like you said, we always circle back. But these are much deeper issues. And to me, like I always say, I think it's our government systems because a lot of those organizations who only can serve certain areas of the city or the town they live in, most of them are working off of grants or
Yeah.
stipends or something from somebody else that's been told them you can only serve this amount of people this time of day in this neighborhood and they got to make this much money. And but we're all critical of that, be like, oh, that's wrong too. However, on the other side of that, you look, it's like maybe that community that they're in, that needs to be the stipulation. Like maybe the people in that community, um, they need that. But then at the same, it's just what I'm getting at is that there are deeper issues because no, I don't agree that that's how it should be. And this is just with food, but it's housing as well. Because again, you got to live in a certain area. You got to
Yeah,
make,
there's so many.
yeah, you got to the money.
Yeah.
But then it's like, and I'm about to go kind of on a tangent, but I'm gonna close it up real quick. Here in Chicago, and I think just in the South and Texas, we have the migrant issue that's, become such a big controversial thing here. And, with people in the neighborhoods where the migrants are, obviously are like, well, you're not seeing about us. Like, we're not being considered, we're not being taken care of. And the thing, I'm like, yeah, that's probably right too. But this issue with the migrants wasn't going to help you because meaning they, the powers that be, the bigger governments and whatnot, they weren't going to take care of you anyway. They already had overlooked you. And so they're continuing to get away with it. Unfortunately, that's real fucked up. But again, I understand where people who live in those
Mhm.
neighborhoods are coming from. But the thing is, powers that be didn't care to begin with. They didn't care about you to begin with. And now they're just kind of adding more onto it. And so, here I think about all the empty lots and houses housing spaces, the residential spaces that we have. Um, why not house people there who need it? And again, I know it's like it's all these deeper issues. This is very surface level, but all of this goes into
Yeah.
much much deeper issues. Um, and again, like I say, it's been a very controversial thing. I think it's going to stay controversial, and it just sucks because I think the government they put people against each other when we really shouldn't be against each other because a lot of us are all in this same space together. It may look like it's different, but it's a lot of it's very, very, very much the same. It's the
Mhm.
same
Mhm.
damn thing. And it's sad
Yeah.
that these different communities are being pitted against each other and against people who are coming here just to seek refuge. You know, it's sad that, this is
Yeah.
where our cities, our states, our country has put people in this sort of position that we're fighting each other over these basic necessities that our government
Yeah.
don't want to provide anyway. Look at what all we've been saying. All you gotta hoops you gotta jump
Yeah.
through just to get adequate anything. So
Yeah.
I'll close this out with that. Lisette gonna wrap up because she's always the wrapper upper. But I will yeah, I'll just close out with that until we come back. That's it.
I mean, I want to get into it,
I
but
know it's so
for
hard
me
not
to,
to get into it because it's
I'm
such
like,
ingrained things because everything is so much deeper,
yeah,
so much deeper.
yeah. Yeah. So all of this to say that we of course will be coming back to a lot of these topics that we kind of brought up in this wrap up episode, which is more like an unwrapping episode. Like we're
Yes.
unwrapping much, deeper issues. And yes, like you know, there are so many issues, deeper issues, structural issues, systemic issues that we know contribute to, this A, to the overall issue of growing old in America, but also into just a lot of the problems that we're seeing today. We've talked in the past about, uh how our society and our government has pitted our communities against each other, and really doing that and what that looks like. We've talked it from the lens of here in Chicago. It's a very segregated city, one of the most segregated cities in the country.
Yeah.
And sort of that. So yeah, there's a lot more to come. As as you all know, when we launch a new series, it always launches much other series as well and other topics. So I think we will definitely be exploring uh, some of these much more systemic, deeper, issues that we've brought up, particularly in this like last episode as we wrap up as well. But I think as we kind of close out this mini series of growing old in America. I think we are just really wanted to just share our experiences as, two individuals who are helping our parents navigate growing old. And it made us think about what it would mean for us as we grow older, as we will at some point hit that, retirement age. And, we can't, we have to think about retirement age, right? Like we have to think about it because we don't know what's going to happen with Social Security. We don't know what's going to happen to any of the safety nets, right? Like everything is just, uncertain. So like I know Martina and I always think about like what is the future going to hold for us? What is, what do we need in order to like get to be old in America? Like
Which
how
is a
can we
privileged position. I will say
yeah,
that my parents will not even get, they just trying to get from day to day. That's all I'm gonna say.
yeah,
Done.
yeah. So like how do we, so I think we really wanted to do this series from that lens of like what we're experiencing, what we're going through with our parents and what we see and some of the issues that we've have come across, and things that have just made us think about our own future and what it means for us as we're two millennials who are like trying to navigate this. And as much as people make fun of millennials and like all these things and our how we
Mhm.
ruin the housing market with our eating just avocado toast and
And
our
our Uber
Starbucks.
Eats.
No.
Uber, if you want to sponsor us. Anyway.
But but when we look deeper into those systemic issues as to how we got here and what has led to this, I think we just wanted to share our experiences and hopefully you all who are watching and listening, either learn something, can maybe, sympathize or empathize with some of the things that we've shared, that maybe you are also experiencing or going through, or maybe starting to
Mhm.
navigate. So, if at any point there's something that you all want, as always, want us to like on to talk about, to expand on, a topic that we kind of brought up, feel free to reach out to us, whether it's a comment on YouTube, or DM us on Instagram. We're fairly sometimes active on Instagram. We're trying to be.
We're trying,
Um,
working on that.
but definitely, we know these aren't easy topics to navigate or talk about. But we definitely always challenge ourselves to put it out there. And even from a personal perspective, this was a very personal series for
Mhm.
both of us, because it's something that we are actively navigating and something that we'll continue to navigate. So we will definitely come back, and share more, as we learn more, as we learn and we figure things out, whatever knowledge we're able to impart on this, because I know we're not the only ones who are in this sort of space and in this sort of position to have to be, whether it's navigator, caregiver, um, to a parent, an aunt or something. There's lots of family members that sometimes we have to help as well. So suffice to say, just in closing, thank you all for watching and listening. As always, we just appreciate y'all's support. And we will be back with future topics and more conversations to come. All right. Bye
Bye,
everyone.
y'all. Take care.